By everybody turning on their microphones and saying the karakia. Takatiho ki te uru, whakatakatiho ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, kia hia ki ana te atakura, i tio, i te uka, i hauku, turuturu, o whiti o kakamawa, te tina, puye, tai. It seems fitting to begin this meeting by welcoming Councillor Bingham back. How unusual not to see you in your togs on the telly.
Unusual not to be in a warmer environment.
But welcome back. So the first thing on the agenda is apologies. We have apologies from Councillors Davey and Muir. I will move those apologies be accepted. Do I have a seconder? Richard, looks to me like you're about to second. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. And we have Councillor Lean on Zoom. So the first item on the agenda is confirmation of the minutes of 18 March. Are there any corrections to those minutes? If no corrections, are there any matters arising from those minutes? If neither, can I have someone... Tom moves, seconded Neil, all in favour?
Aye.
Moving now to item 6, consent monitoring annual reports. Abby.
Thank you, Chair. I'll turn my microphone on. Good morning, everyone. So we're bringing you 21 tailored compliance monitoring reports today. Within the reports, we have 38 performance ratings assigned as high, 20 assigned as good, and I do need to make a correction to the next one. Rather than 9, it's 10 requiring improvement and 1 rated poor. So improvement required, we had a number of consents needing to do additional work or respond to enforcement action that was taken against some of them for abatement notices and various other things. One of them was Remediation New Zealand, so they continue to have issues with their compost management, noting that their irrigation management had improved this year and they were operating within the limits of that. Fonterra Whareroa were exceeding some stormwater pond limits and didn't meet their administration reporting deadlines. Silverfern Farms had some issues with their irrigation to land and are doing some further investigation around their nitrate groundwater levels, noting that they have a new consent now in place that has some more stringent requirements with it. Civil Quarries is investigating some of the groundwater impacts of their dewatering activities and also the discharging of some sediment levels and turbidity. And some of our catchment programs also had some improvements required through some of them. So I'll summarise that and happy to take questions.
So as far as our friends, the remediation people go, are we able to manage them in such a way that we're not getting repeated non-compliance? Is there anything more we should be doing?
So my understanding is that they're no longer operating. There's no longer material coming onto the site, but they do have to continue to manage their compost pile. So there's still work that can be done there to process that on the site. So ongoing inspections are still important, which is why we've still got that program in place.
So you feel that there's sufficient pressure being brought to bear on them to get as close to compliance as we can?
And Fred,
yes,
comment
sure.
on that, but yes, yeah.
The consent that the application for consent to address the refurbishment of the site is a work in progress. We're making some progress there, but we haven't formally received it with all the information we want in it yet.
So is there a deadline for that?
The deadline is the High Court are going to hear their appeal on the consent decision. So the application for this consent is ideally going to be received before then, processed by us with the involvement of all the parties before the High Court, but before the appeal is going to be heard.
And do we have a date for the hearing of the appeal?
It's in about 2 or 3 months' time, roughly.
Can you let us know when that date is? Because I would certainly like to attend court to listen to the argument.
Madam Chair, just asking an extension, I guess, is there any possibility of further appeal after the High Court, whatever it
Yes.
might be?
You could go to the Court of Appeal.
So in fact, if you wish to, you can really spin these things out for an enormous length of time.
You could potentially, but what tends to follow a failed appeal is a decent order of costs. You're not able, by and large, to further appeal without meeting that obligation. And, you know, a string of failures can result in the court deciding to accord some urgency to a matter.
Madam Chairman, I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but I declare an interest in the Manawa Energy Morikawa scheme as we farm alongside it.
Well, it looks like it's a high performer, so I don't think we need to...
Oh, I agree, but I'm just stating that.
I was just really disappointed with these compared to usual. They're usually like, you know, and Whararoa seems to be coming up quite a lot. Have we talked to senior management there?
So I'll address the first question first. Often the team will deal with the relatively easy ones early in the year, so the ones that don't have compliance issues, their reports will get summed up quite quickly. Usually as we get to the back of the reporting period, the gnarlier ones start to come through, so that's why
so
you're seeing that, yeah. Although that said, the numbers overall have still shown that trend of improvement over time in terms of the number that are hitting the high and good rating. So, you know, we've got pretty high performance generally across the board, so it's hard to get marginal improvements on that year on year. But yeah, overall it is good. It just looks particularly bad because they've all landed in this reporting period. In terms of Whareroa, so yeah, they've got some issues, or they had some issues with their stormwater pond. Consented limits being exceeded. My understanding is they offered up an explanation for that, and that was accepted by council.
But their reporting's not up to it, is it?
So they didn't make.
Have we received that now?
Yes, we have. Yeah, but they didn't quite hit the deadline. So that's an administrative issue rather than an environmental issue. So the rating. Yeah, we calculate both ratings for administration and environmental performance, and the environmental performance has a higher weighting. So, yeah.
Okay. Neil.
Yes, Madam Chair, just still talking about the Fonterra thing. The fact is that Fonterra has not like many of these other people, it has a full-time staff that deal with these particular issues. And they shouldn't be able to notice there's a whole lot of things on page 104 of the later report as well. So after, and again, knowing some of the people involved who've done that job for a very long time, and really I'm very surprised in view of that you're getting these sorts of problems. Maybe it is getting to a time when we always joked about Mr. McClay having to take people into his study and give them a bit of a talking to. But seriously, a big company like Fonterra, in the situation it is, we should expect better and more from them rather than even at blaming lower level people or something like this. It is an important issue, and they have the resources and they have the staff to deal with it.
Any comment?
And they expect a lot from their farmers, and we don't get that lateness, do we?
Anyone for any more?
Go on, where you go.
So just by way of context, the level of detail you get on monitoring is second to none. Any council in New Zealand, you get a really detailed look at who's doing what, who's not doing what. And given my private sector experience and the company I work for, they did not want to appear before you as not compliant. So this is a tool in itself to try and change behaviour around compliance. Right? Everybody wanted to appear here as high. Right? So if they're not found as high, that's a tool we can use to get people to improve.
Donald?
Contrary to what I said before, talking about the Morikawa power scheme, the consent has been applied for. What progress has been made on that, do you know?
So through you, Chair, I'll refer to Leah.
We, through Chair, we are currently seeing pre-hearing papers, both of those schemes, in May this year, to make sure that the submitters are trying
I mean, it's always better to resolve things by negotiation than an imposed solution provided by an outside source, aka a judge or whatever, by way of hearing. Right.
Just further to that, what correspondence are you doing with the submitters on that?
This week, the EU come out with online to do a site visit, and then some of the submitters, the legal stand. Alan's been around a long time, it's very they often include site visit depending on desired parties. Stand's not changing. It's not everybody. Concerns raised, discussed.
Right. Anyone for more? Richard?
Different. But
Sure.
page 15, Greenford. Just curious on that one. Obviously, they're coming through as good, but we've got that outstanding issue of the upgrading for the first passage. Noting their current position, and that's on the market, does the consent essentially get assigned if there's a new purchaser of that scheme? How does that work, and how will that work? Noting it's been significantly delayed to date for them to get that work done, and that may just keep pushing that time frame out.
You, Madam Chair, consents are transferred to
Yep, so
the new party, so the obligations remain.
Will remain. Cool.
If there's nothing else, can I have someone move that we receive and note the consent monitoring annual reports? Donna and Benita. All in favour?
Aye.
So moving now, and welcome Charlotte. I understand Charlotte's had some technical problems, but you're here, so that's excellent. Moving now to resource consents issued under delegated authority, being tab 7. And Leah.
Morena ko. So we've been between 1st of March and 31st of March, we issued 23 discharge permits, 10 land use consents and 3 water permits. At the moment, the total applications in progress are 245 applications in progress, with 194 of those being replacements. For comparison, the same time last year we had 440 in progress with 346 replacements. We've received 140 non-dairy applications and made a decision on 229 non-dairy applications, so this has reduced the backlog by about 89 consents. We've issued 321 consents this year, compared to 250 consents at the same time. As we had a few queries last time on the backlog, in January, any consents from the previous financial year are added to the backlog. So as at February this year, there was 215 non-dairy consents on the backlog. As of end of March, this had already reduced to 180. For comparison, March last year, we had 307 consents on the backlog. So that means about 33% more applications were processed in the period compared to last year, which has reduced the backlog by approximately 25%.
Well done you.
Yeah.
You must be stoked with your team and the progress that you're making in shifting that backlog. It's epic.
Yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair, some of the ones that are left are quite big ones. I'm bringing it to you in code, so if the pre-hearing process works, it's great, but if they don't, then we're into the hearing process. So,
Which
yes,
you are right
no.
to avoid if you can push it. It's worth spending the time in the pre-hearing process, even though it's a bit tortuous, a lot tortuous, perhaps, than it is to spend that time and effort in a hearing.
So the investment that council made in more staff is paying dividends.
And we're not using any externals.
So that was my question.
We use it as
We've got one external planner working for us at the moment. We have one of our planners also moving to the policy team, so we will need to keep them on. And then one of our planners is going overseas for a month at the same time. So we'll use that one group of people, but at the moment there's only one of them planners working for us. But they're our preference over all of the 5 consultants we had working for us. We just have one working for us now, with a preference of who works well and understands, our culture and way of working, and is respectful with but it's quite helpful to still have that there in case when new consents come in and if you have to get them done within 100% time frame, then you need to have them there just to meet that need as it arises.
Neil?
Just one question. You had a number, obviously, of pre-hearings and sorted a whole lot of things out. In the past, it seems like there was always a small number that actually went ahead for some actual hearing. So you've done very well. Is there a different changing attitude where perhaps people are more prepared to come to a pre-hearing agreement than before, or is it just that nothing has happened that is significant enough that people want to go that way?
Through you, Chair, it really depends on the nature of the submitters. Some submitters you just can't reason with, and you could go through multiple pre-hearings and get nowhere, and it wastes everyone's time. Some of them you can narrow the scope of the hearing so that it doesn't take as long. And some of them, if you've got submitters that are willing to work with you, they're practical, they understand the scope of what can be included and what can't, then you can get those through the pre-hearing process. It does take longer sometimes. That's our learning. You don't want to drag something out for 3 years that could be done in a hearing in a shorter time frame. So it's kind of a balance.
So Madam Chair, it's not actually the time frame thing, but obviously you're actually succeeding in getting them to agree. Most of these, there's no sign here that I'm seeing of, now that we don't do the hearings, but we get experts from outside to do them. It just seems quite a while since we've had to actually appoint one of these. So I just wondered if there was something of a change of attitude, even if they may, shall we say, hold out for quite some time. It may be quite a lot of argument about it. It does seem as if you're finally closing the deal.
So through you, Madam Chair, the key component of our pre-hearing process is if there are agreements reached during that process, the consents will be monitored and enforced. So there's integrity in the process and trust in council officers doing the deals which turn up on your table to be reviewed. That's the key difference and fundamental difference as to why we have a long history of success.
You're not using chloroform or anything like that.
No problem.
Anyone else for anything? Yes, Richard.
So firstly, just want to acknowledge all the work for 56 Pahutakawa Place. That consent there's very sensitive wetlands there, and obviously you guys, it's been a long process, but it looks like a really good outcome has been achieved there, which is awesome for Puketapu and Te Atiawa. Question around Mills Albert. How is that one going to be monitored? I still don't quite understand fully plucking that methodology, but how do you monitor that when it seems like they can't have excavation machinery, or there's quite limited in what they can do, yet they're going to be plucking stones on the surface?
Yeah, so a lot of our monitoring would be around whether there's any wetlands and whether there's any distances to those wetlands set in the consent conditions and how we can get to that. That makes it much easier for the compliance team when there's specific conditions in place, which has been put through the conditions. As far as blocking and land use aspect, it's more looking for us at more it may end more than
Anyone else? If not, can I have someone move that we receive the schedule of resource consents? Neil, and seconded by Donald. All in favour? Aye. Moving now to item 8, which is incidents and compliance. Jared.
Through you, Chair. Incidents, compliance monitoring and enforcement. A summary from 21 Feb to 3 April. Reasonably quiet on the incident front and compliance monitoring non-compliances over this period. So there's 64 incidents were reported, 26 were to be compliant and 23 were non-compliant. So nearly a 50-50 split there. And then 10 compliance monitoring non-compliances recorded, along with updates under both categories there. One matter that has popped up, and you'll probably pick it up through there, is we've had an increase in odour complaints from gas and plumbing. So there's 4 over that period. So gas and plumbing operate under, they don't have a resource consent, they operate under permitted activities, which means the rule they operate under, they can't have odour at all. So that they have to maintain, they have to be very, very vigilant with their site operations to maintain no odour. And during this period, obviously, they've fallen short of that. So they have been issued an abatement notice and a number of infringement notices. Since then, it seems to have decreased, the odours coming from there. It's very heavily linked to management of the site, staff turnover and things like that. So we are monitoring that, and hopefully we're over that blip and they're back into.
Was there, Tom?
This one, through the chair, has been coming up often, hasn't it, over the years? We've always had problems around that site. Is it, you know, the best site to have there, or they probably should relocate or something? I don't know, but we seem to, this pops up every year, and usually multiple.
Yeah, it's been there, I'm not sure how long, but it's definitely over my tenure. So it's been there for at least 11 or 12 years. And they dewater sludge, wastewater. So it's an odorous job, and it's now in a relatively built-up area. So the long-term viability of that site would be questionable.
So you're getting sort of a reverse sensitivity with the passage of time. Okay.
It's probably worse than that, Chair, because it's been going on for a long time, and that odour does carry a long way. So I don't think they've really got on top of how they manage the odour situation. And I mean, it probably doesn't make it a bit more sensitive with housing around it, but it has been there for a long time. And I know we've discussed it around this table many times.
What we tend to find as well is we'll get a period like this, and then they will pull their socks up and we won't hear from them for a considerable amount of time. So there is periods of good compliance, but at the moment they've gone through a period of poor.
Thank you.
Continue, Jared, if there's anything more you need to discuss.
Open to any questions, just going on from the previous conversation with the rock plucking. So we monitor that, and as Leah said, the two risks environmentally are the processing area around silt and sediment, and around where they're rock plucking and their proximity to wetlands. So the area has been designated to where they're allowed to take those activities, and all the wetlands in those areas have been identified. So it comes down to monitoring very stringently that they're operating with those appropriate setbacks, and that ultimately the guy and the digger knows what those setbacks are. Because if we know and the owner knows, it doesn't work unless the guy and the digger knows. So that's where the focus of enforcement or compliance around that operation sits.
Richard?
I've got another query, but not about that, but around, there's a number coming up about works in and around wetlands and isn't that coming into this. Are they typically the landowners completing those works themselves, or are they the landowner and a third-party contractor completing those works? So I guess it's understanding, the contractors should know, right? So is it actually a landowner
It's
understanding their responsibilities?
It's the odd contract. The majority of the time, it's the landowner. Landowner dry hires a digger or owns a digger. We've had a dry period. We've had an increased payout. Maintenance is always something people want to do, and sometimes they get it wrong. Look, the wetlands that we've had, and we have had certainly a number in the last few weeks that have come through. They are the smaller wetlands, and that are hard to define as wetlands as well. So we've had to, luckily we've got a great wetland ecologist at this organisation that comes at the drop of a hat and comes out to these incidents. And often, you know, the wetlands are smaller than we think they are, but obviously bigger than but a lot of them would be, you know, the ones we've been dealing with, most of them would be quarter size of this room. So it's about how we reach out to those people and try and educate them around wetlands and their knowledge of it.
Well, that's the issue I see, is how we communicate with people, and that we can think we're sending a perfectly clear message to someone, but are we? Because if they're not receiving it...
Or through you know, they're aware of it and they choose to ignore it.
I understand that there's that, but it's just something that I've increasingly discovered, that I can think, in various organisations I'm involved with, that sending someone an email is a perfectly adequate method of communication. Well, it's not. If you're under 40, you don't bother reading emails at all. And so, you know, there's all sorts of ways of communicating. I mean, I confronted this recently with a whole bunch of junior doctors who were whinging about poor communication from from the medical council, for instance. And when it was pointed out, well, we don't read any of those emails. We want group chats. We want this. We want that. That's the only way we're going to communicate with you. Are we communicating in a diverse and modern way, as opposed to one size fits all?
And I guess some of these wetlands brought up that conversation, exactly that, the other week. And, you know, and if I look at the NCAP things, you know, there was things put out on the radio, there was comms on Facebook, there was direct letters and email, there was then actual posted letters, and we still had 80 people, and a bunch of those said they'd never heard that they had to do it.
Well, Facebook is only for people around the 60 mark, 50 to 60. So all the young people, I mean, if you look at anybody here, look at those young ones at the back, they're laughing. So I mean, when did you last look at Facebook?
So with NCATs we've tried to do the old snail mail to meet those over a certain age, and then we've tried to email to meet the other age group, and then we've tried to Facebook to get the other demographic and a little bit on the radio.
Where does Mr. Boyd fit into this?
Yeah, look, we get a majority of them. Where we struggle are those people that aren't dairy farmers, that aren't necessarily linked in with land and beef and lamb or catchment communities, are running dry stock, don't have riparian plans, and they're the outliers that are ones we need to somehow figure out how to best engage with those folk. And that's a difficult challenge because they don't, you know, to them a post is something you put on the ground and put 8 wires on. It's not a
I agree.
So.
I mean, you can think that you are communicating effectively, but if your target market's not receiving that communication, you're not. You're wasting time.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll reassess what we do and try and do more through the likes of Contractors Federation and Federated Farmers and the like. But staff are generally making an effort to try.
I'm not doubting the effort. It's the effectiveness of it and the diverse mechanisms by way of communication. It just completely fascinates me when I see how young people think that they receive information, for instance. But I'm guessing that most of these people are north of 40 anyway, so they're not young. Bad news for you fellas who thought you were.
For that, I'll move the recommendation.
Yep, okay. Tom's moving, seconder. Donna's second, all in favour?
Aye.
So we're now on to tab 9, analysis of the compliance monitoring for 2023-24. Jared.
So through you, Chair, this is a report which is we shared with Council last year. I think we share it with Council every year. It's an analysis of the compliance monitoring enforcement metric for the regional sector. So it looks at, it commenced in 2018 and it's run annually. And it covers off 16 councils, regional councils and unitary authorities. So the unitaries are Auckland, Tasman, Gisborne, Marlborough and Nelson. And ultimately it attempts to provide some reassurance to the public as to how regional councils and unitary authorities are conducting themselves in the way of monitoring the resource users, monitoring resource consents, responding to complaints, and how they're holding those that don't comply accountable for their actions. It's now starting, it's the 7th year of it, so it's starting to paint quite a good picture, and I think generally the work across the sector is improving year
Are you
on
seeing
year
consistency of metrics? So, because there seems to be something in here that suggests that Waikato's a bit of an outlier.
What's not unusual?
Yes. So I think looking at the report, you've hit the nail on the head there. Is although it appears, I think we're all getting better in what we do, there's still an element of consistency that needs to be improved on, and all the regional managers do meet regularly to discuss those matters. Look, it's I mean, the fundamental question is what is good CME and what does good CME look like? And each council table, I'd imagine, has a slightly different opinion on what good CME looks like, and that can influence the way councils undertake their work. And Waikato are, they are a bit of an outlier in that. Their view on CME seems to sit a little different from some of the other councils.
Would you say the rest of the other councils are pretty much all on the same page, that they are, Waikato is genuinely an outlier?
Waikato use slightly different tools. They tend to use a lot of formal warnings and things, whereas councils like ourselves, probably Bay of Plenty, Northland, we relate very similar to Northland, and we use the enforcement tools that are set by the Resource Management Act and try and demonstrate a graduated approach to enforcement. So using those lesser tools a lot more frequently to reduce the number of people we need to prosecute. So I think when you look through here, and Taranaki's page 174 at the back is mirrored quite similar to Northland and some of those other councils.
Okay. Anyone, any questions for Jared?
So through you, Madam Chair, when the early results of this work came out, some councils found themselves under the spotlight, and since have made considerable efforts to, as Jared was saying, to improve. And what this demonstrates is the sector being really transparent and open. And when you open up and compare a whole lot of data, you can compare and contrast. And some of those who weren't doing a lot of CME councils changed their approach, changed their funding, and started doing more. And so the point I'm clumsily making here is being really transparent shows up what's really happening and brings about change.
Neil?
I just really say that just have to acknowledge very good work on behalf of the staff here, that it really is quite close to what we would say is a pretty good score, and as such it's the same every year. And maybe it's a bit of a lesson why sometimes when you see a lot of criticisms of regional councils and you say, well, we're doing what we're doing, or our staff are doing what they're doing, the fact is that isn't the same everywhere. Some of them have in the past rather dropped the ball.
Madam Chairman, can I ask, is the new RMA likely to standardise a lot more of this process, or not really?
Through you, Madam Chair, it'll probably, yeah, we'll probably do that.
And who's going to enforce that, I suppose, is really the critical
That's
question.
the question here. Yeah. Who's going to monitor the monitors?
Yeah, MFE should be, but they've been pretty slack.
So councillors here would have to reflect and say the effort we put into compliance monitoring and enforcement is significant. But I tell you what, if we did not do that, we would have, Abby would be coming to you and telling you about the environmental gauges heading in the wrong direction. Right? Some of this compliance monitoring and enforcement work we're doing is just managing us to hold our own. Right? And as noted earlier when Leah was talking about consents, when we do that, the pre-hearing process works. Right? There are huge savings in that pre-hearing process working, where people don't have to go to hearings and like. So it's a fundamental part of what we do and how it helps other parts of our operation. So it's hard to see us without it in terms of the way we've used it over the last 40 years.
Okay. On that note, can I have someone move that we receive and note the report? Anaru, you're going to move, and who haven't we heard from today? Dion, you would want to second that. All in favour?
Aye.
So moving on now to public excluded. Can I have someone move that we move into public excluded? Neil, second. Donald, all in favour?
Aye.
And the only item on the public